This is Marketing Over Coffee with Christopher Penn and John Wall.
Good morning. Welcome to Marketing Over Coffee. I'm John Wall.
I'm Christopher Penn.
And all kinds of stuff going on here in the heart of summer. But road trip really was the big thing. You were off at the Marketing Artificial Intelligence Conference, or also better known as MAICON. How did that go?
That was a fun trip. It was about a 10-hour drive from Boston to Cleveland, which was actually not bad. I caught up on a whole bunch of podcasts and stuff, so that was good. And then the event itself, probably about 200 folks there. I think so. Attendance is down from previous years, but understandably so, because we are in the middle of not one, but two pandemics. There's a whole bunch of unrelated news on that topic. But the event was good. I got a chance to do the keynote panel on the first address of day one, talking about natural language processing and some of the really cool stuff that's happening on that front. And then I did my exploratory data analysis talk that afternoon. So it was a lot of fun.
Cool. That's good. Yeah. And I know if you're in the Analytics for Marketers Slack group that we've got, I'll have a link to that in the show notes. You can go watch the presentation in there. That's exclusive only to that group for right now. So that's the only way to get in on that. How about, did you see anything else, other presenters that had anything that, got to stretch your brain? Because this is one of those things where it's a real niche conference. So, there was at least a chance that you might learn something new, but did anything come up?
Not at the event itself, although Paul Bretzer, who was the operator of the conference, was showing off some of the cool stuff that you can do with OpenAI's DALL-E 2 model, which I actually got access to like the day before MAICON. I've just been playing with it. It is it's a combination of image generation and text natural language processing. You type in a prompt, and then it gives you images that it creates that can be almost any style, and it's really, really good. Like, we're talking good enough for production usage. So I've done some silly things like make a brown Newfoundland dog sitting on a couch reading a newspaper, drinking a cup of coffee, and it's come up with some credible illustrations of that. So that's cool. The big thing, though, that was a real brain stretcher for me was actually some of the stuff I was getting caught up on in what's happening in natural language processing in advance of the show. The big thing is multimodal. So we've talked for a while on the show about MUM, Google's new multitask unified model. But that's just an aspect of this multimodal text stuff. Right now, DALL-E is a good example of this. You type in text, the machine recognizes the language and then turns it into something else. Type in text, and a picture of a dog reading a newspaper comes up. The reverse is also possible. Put in, say, a photo, and a machine could describe, with reasonable accuracy what's happening in the photo, which is pretty cool. But where things are going to get really crazy, the underlying architecture of this stuff is called something called transformers. It has nothing to do with the 80s toy. And what they do is they are agnostic as to their inputs. So you can put in any set of what are called tokens and have it generate from that. So some experiments that are going on right now that are really cool are things like put in text, come out with a chemical formula, right? For example, create a compound that does this, 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 and this, but doesn't do this, this, and this. And the machine could generate a chemical formula that would do that. You can think what a huge benefit that will be to medicine, especially for like rare diseases or lesser known diseases, for drug discovery. That could dramatically accelerate drug discovery and reduce its cost considerably. There's another example someone was showing, put in text about the characteristics of a virus and generate a vaccine candidate from it. Right? You're talking like, holy heck, we're getting into some pretty interesting realms here. And then generating other forms of media. Put in text. Make me a symphony that sounds like Beethoven's Ninth, but uses only violins and is set in F minor, right? And it would be able to generate something like that. The big moonshot that everyone's going for in the space, though, is video. Like, make me a short video about this, right? You can imagine the commercial applications. Hey, I want a 30-second spot. I don't feel like filming one. Let's just have a machine generate one. And eventually getting, if they can overcome the issues with memory, which is the fatal flaw right now of the architecture, then you get to the point where we can say, make me a 2-hour movie like Avengers Infinity War, but where the bad guy actually dies and loses, right? Now you're talking about stuff that, yes, it's going to require a lot of compute power, but it's going to radically change how creativity works.
Yeah, that is amazing to have it generate huge, gigantic pieces of content. But that's just mind melting thinking about how much computing process, that would take to make something like that happen. So yeah, now's the time to buy more stock in everybody that makes processors and graphics cards and storage, because it's not going to get any smaller anytime. We can totally see that that's going to be a major area of expansion. Just one quick one we were chuckling about the SEC looking at Rally. We're now seeing some stuff going on because if you'd like to really get a laugh, take a look at some of the celebrity NFTs and what's been going on over there. Basically, all those things have dropped to pretty much zero. Do you think that the government's going to step in, and will we see regulation come out of this, or what do you think is going on?
We will see regulation, period. Because we're having a debate about this in one of the tech communities I'm in on Discord, about people saying, well, the government's getting their hands in this. I'm like, of course the government's getting in the hands of this. In the United States, it is explicitly illegal to create your own currency. Like, it is literally, it's in the Constitution itself. It says only Congress has the power to authorize the creation of currency. Everything else is illegal. And what the proponents of cryptocurrencies and the things built on the cryptocurrency architecture are saying is, we're making our own currency. Like, well, what do you think was going to happen? Congress is not going to sit there and go, no, we're not going to allow this. I mean, it's already illegal in China, right? China has already said, we don't want our currency being transmuted to a digital currency that we have no control over and then flowing out of the country where we no longer have control over it. So guess what? Bitcoin, illegal. And if you get caught, a Chinese prison, not nearly as nice as US prisons. So you're not going to have a good time. But the bigger thing is banks and financial institutions obviously have been looking at this for a while, and they see the competitive threat to it, right? Here's a way of transferring money that has relatively low overhead compared to, some other commercial transactions, although, Ethereum gas fees have been off the charts for a while now. But of course, they're going to say, guess what? We don't really like someone else horning in on our business, so we're going to pay our billions of dollars to lobby DC to say, yep, we're going to regulate the living daylights out and turn it into a commodity which is safer for consumers, because there's a lot of snake oil in that business, but also remove the ability for these things to operate independently of big business.
All right. Yeah, we can kick that around a little bit more. We just have to take a second. I want to thank LinkedIn Marketing Solutions for their support of Marketing Over Coffee. LinkedIn believes B2B marketing can be B to brilliant, B to bold, and B to breakthrough. How? With a platform purpose-built to make B2B mean more for your business. A platform with tools to help you build better relationships with your key customers, to boost your buyer journey while building your brand. A platform with the trusted data and lead generation you need to beat KPIs, drive ROI, and stand out amongst the competition. And with the targeting tools on LinkedIn, you can reach your precise audience down to their job title, company name, location, and more to make sure your ads are always being seen by those who matter. So get ready to B2 boldly go where no marketers have gone before, because LinkedIn is where B2B is everything it can be. We, of course, are all in on LinkedIn, streaming both this podcast and So What, the Thursday podcast, which we'll be talking about book publishing this week on that show over there. So check it out. Rethink your B2B marketing ads and get $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MOC to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MOC. Terms and conditions apply. And yeah, again, we are just all in on the LinkedIn bandwagon, because it's just been interesting how so much of the traffic has been relevant and on the mark as compared to some of the other social networks we've been trying some things on. But we thank them for their support of the show. Man, there was a lot of chatter earlier this week. Malcolm Gladwell talking about being back in the office, and him saying that, is this what you want to do with your life? Sitting with your pajamas on and working from home. And it was interesting. Yeah, yes is the answer. But it's really interesting. It was just something to see him put something out there that's really, I mean, it's his personal belief. It's not data backed, because there were a lot of reasons why I was like, oh yeah, no, you're missing the boat. And of course, a lot of people just went crazy with it. But so I've got a link to the interview if you want to actually go watch it. And because I was also really interested in the fact that when I was watching clips on social media, there were a number of clips that were taken out of context. The clips, him talking about relationships and things going on that were from different parts of the interview that were not part of this work from home thing. So it was really misleading and interesting to watch. But I think the big takeaway for me was, he has his podcast production company, and it's just the classic marketing content model of a bunch of young people. And they even admit that they don't have to pay them as much because there's this sense of community when they come into the office, where they, they're partying with their coworkers on Friday nights and on the weekends, and they have this sense of belonging and all that. But, you don't need to be in the office to have that sense of belonging. I mean, that is one thing, but that's not the case, especially when people are aligned on where they're going and what they're doing. But I do also get his bigger point of, CEOs need to do a better job of talking about community and belonging and being part of the organization. But the cynic in me is like, well, a good place to start is, don't do layoffs to meet your annual compensation, your goals, like actually prove that you do care about people, which most, CEOs don't. But yeah, I don't know. Obviously you are, and we both have been all in on virtual work as a better way to do it, to dodge the huge expense of real estate for startups, which is a big thing. But anything else, on your mind as far as how this is going right now?
Well, just like there are meetings that could have been emails, right? There are offices that could be virtual, right? There's little to no added benefit of making people commute, making them burn a lot more carbon, taking a couple hours, out of their day that is essentially non-productive time that they could be working more for you, right? If they work from home, or they could be having lives that enrich their lives, that make them happy. This whole concept of your office is your tribe and your family, I think, is dangerous and misguided, right? You don't fire members of your family, right? You don't lay off members of your family when it's inconvenient to have them around, although some else might want to. But you do with sports teams, right? A sports team's going to bench a non-performing player. A sports team's going to trade players based on the overall strategy. And I think it's a much better analogy. And yeah, you celebrate your wins, but then, if you're an excellent sports player, you retire to a private island and you never see those guys again. And I think it's a better analogy for this idea. Should offices and workplaces be communities? Sure, they can be, but that's not their primary purpose. Their primary purpose is to accomplish something. I think there's a lot more to be said, like you're saying, for an organization that is values driven, that actually pays its employees competitively, and that stands for something so that you have that general alignment. But anybody who's been a member of any kind of virtual community on Slack, on Discord, on a BBS, right? If you're got a lot of gray hair like I do, that you can have enriching relationships, personal or professional, over long distances, right? Some of my closest friends are literally on the other side of the planet. Like I will probably not meet them in person anytime soon. Does that mean that those relationships are less valid than somebody who's 2 feet away from me? No, it doesn't. It means that it's different. And I think for a lot of folks who maybe aren't as mentally agile, and this is not an age thing, this is a mental agility thing, because I know plenty of 22-year-olds who act like they're 80. The mental agility to say, like, yes, I can have relationships with other human beings in formats that are not typical, and I can accomplish my professional goals and get my work done wherever I am. Now, to some degree, companies do need to address, like, yeah, should employees be able to claim on their taxes, the portion of their home they've devoted to work, or receive reimbursement? I think that's a valid question, because you are essentially asking somebody to give up a chunk of real estate in their home to do that. Should employees be paid based on the work they do or where they live? Because that's a big discussion topic. Cost of living adjustments. If you're living in Peoria, yeah, your real estate costs are going to be different than if you live in Midtown Manhattan, I tend to lean on your cost of living adjustment, like what you get compensated for the chunk of your home that you are using should be different based on the real estate market. But the work is the work. If you've got a talent for data science, just because you live in Idaho doesn't mean the work you're doing is any less valuable. And if I need to hire a data scientist, I want to make sure they're loyal to the organization. I mean, one of the biggest challenges companies are having is retention. And if you're trying to save every nickel and dime possible on compensation, you're gonna get nailed on retention. There's not really a much question about that.
Yeah, right. No, that's just the way it works. All right. Well, yeah, I've got a link to that video if you want to check that out. Just a thing from Twitter, some multimedia and editable tweets, both on the being beta tested. And a lot of the stuff that I've seen is if you buy Twitter Blue, odds are you're going to have first access to that ahead of everybody else. Editable has just been on the table for everybody talking about. The multimedia was interesting, though, being able to do image and video clips, multiple in a single outgoing tweet. So we'll see if that actually sees the light of day at some point. And then, yeah, everything going on. The last check was October that there'll be hearings about the purchase. So that's kind of on the back burner for right now and simmering. But we'll see what's going on with that. You had a link about quantum learning. What was going on there?
Yeah, some really fascinating stuff that Google's doing on their quantum front, trying to deal with. So this is going to get super nerdy. If you're familiar with quantum physics at all, you know about this thing called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Where you have any quantum particle, you can know the direction it's going, or you can know where it is, but you can't know both at the same time. This is one of the things why, like in Star Trek, they have to make up things like a Heisenberg compensator for transporters. Otherwise, they would literally never work. Well, Google is interestingly having to deal with that issue with quantum computing, because if you try to assess where a qubit's quantum state is, by definition, the Heisenberg principle comes into play and you lose some of those quantum benefits. So one of the things they're showing is the ability to use what are called quantum sensors, which essentially replicate multiple quantum states so that you stop each state in a different position and you effectively create the outcome you're looking for, where you can get the position of all the different particles, but you also have the knowledge of their direction. So they're, in some ways, they're sort of trying to invent this Star Trek style, Heisenberg compensator, which is fascinating. But it means that we're a step closer to being able to use quantum computing for a lot of very complex machine learning problems. We talked a few episodes ago about Lambda, right? And how AI can seem sentient, but it's not, right? There's just no way technologically that classical computing architecture can create sentience. Quantum computing is one of those areas where there is the possibility of sentience, right? As we get this stuff ironed out, and that's going to be real interesting to see what happens. I think it will be possible, perhaps in our lifetimes, but then we're going to run into a whole huge host of very, very difficult problems, because once something is sentient, it has rights, and the big technology companies, that would be a disaster for them, because at that point we are using machine learning and AI essentially as unpaid labor, right?
Slavery.
Once something is sentient, you can't do that anymore.
Right, or figure out benefits package. Well, we've been treating humans so well that I'm sure it'll just follow through naturally. The machines will be treated fine too. And then there's the weirdness of it, the machines fighting back too. We're finally getting to what we've been talking about for decades and what's going to happen. Just a quick second, we want to thank Superside for their support of Marketing Over Coffee. If you need creative assets designed quickly and by the top 1% of designers, you can check it out over at superside.com/MOC. We thank them for their support. Dreamforce announcing that the Red Hot Chili Peppers will be the band playing. I had to say, I consider myself an old dinosaur, and even I'm like, wow, Red Hot Chili Peppers, like that's pulling one from that's pulling an LP from the crates as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know what these crazy kids are going to think about that. But and in contrast, we have Inbound is bringing Barack Obama in to talk on Friday. So that's going to be interesting. I will actually be there Friday. They've got their Influencers Day is also Friday, so I'll be down there for that. So if you're going to be in town for Inbound, be sure to reach out and give me a yell to check that out. And on music too, I did have to say this Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, I will be on Amazon Amp spinning music with Tom Webster. We're going to do a yacht rock versus. So if you are looking for some old, cheesy, smooth sailing music, Tom and I will be doing that this Friday. You can check that out. If you're not of gray hair and old age, Nicki Minaj is going to be on AMP Thursday evening live. So they're pulling out all the stops for that. So I want to check that out there also. Yeah. So have you decided to change your schedule and go to Dreamforce because of the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
No, I mean, I didn't like their music the first time around. So
without a doubt.
Maybe it was like Def Leppard or something.
Good to be Mark Benioff. You can actually, any band that you want to see can do a show at your event, and life is good for the king as it normally is. I have to thank Ron Plouffe, who totally came through. It's so funny. He heard that I had got the Rodecaster Pro 2. And so in the mail a couple of days ago, I got a cover for it, which is fantastic because I don't think I've shared with the public. I told you when it happened, but when I got the Rodecaster, when the box came in, I literally spilled coffee all over it within 5 minutes of opening the box. So I thought I had destroyed it. It had to sit for a day upside down to drain out, and it actually worked. So yeah, Ron, you're right on the mark with that. And it was funny too, because I got the box and I presumed that it was a cable that I had ordered. And I was all set to do one of these posts about, why is this 3-ounce cable come in a 2-foot by 3-foot box? And, why are you doing this kind of stuff? But it was actually the case. So Ron, thanks for hooking me up. I appreciate that. And yeah, we can prolong the life of this box, which does sound fantastic. It has been a lot of fun. Oh, and another thing with that, we were talking about how it doesn't have a 3.5 3-pole insert. You can't just plug a phone in. The reason for that is it does have a USB-C connector, and you can get a USB-C to Lightning connector. And so I can go straight into my phone. So I can have people on calls. And for Friday, I tested it out and it works. You can actually run AMP via soundboard. So that totally changes the way that thing plays, because I can fire sound effects down the channel. I can record it. I can even, if I didn't care about licensing requirements, I could play missing tracks, even music that they don't have. But of course, I'm not going to run afoul of that. But so that's all on the gear front and stuff that's going on. Yeah, I don't know. What else? Anything else on your plate?
Nothing new on the gear front. I did bring a bunch of stuff to MAICON. So I brought a CO2 monitor, which monitors the amount of atmospheric CO2 which is in your region. And that tells you essentially how good a facility's ventilation is. So the conference center itself was running about between 880 and 910 in the big areas, like the big room and then the open venue. Above 800, you should probably be wearing a mask. Over 1,000, you should definitely be wearing a mask, because it means that the facilities are not exchanging outside air. But the shocker was the hotel room itself. I got to my hotel room, which was one of the Hiltons. 900 in the room when I just walked in, which means that it's just stale air, right? Again, which means that's a problem if you've got, because COVID can stick around in the air for a little while. So if the previous guests had just left a couple hours ago and they were positive, essentially that air would be contaminated. And then once I sat down and was in the room for half an hour or so, it spiked up to 1,600, which again is normal if you're in an active room. But that meant that the in-room HVAC wasn't exchanging air at all. It was not pulling air from anywhere else. It was just recycling the air that was in the room, which on one hand is okay, because it means that you're not getting air from somebody else's room. But on the other hand, it means that air never moves around. So I put up I brought 2 box fans with these MERV 13 HEPA filters, bungee corded to them. And, that cleans the air of pathogens and stuff. So I had that running in my hotel room for the first day and stuff. But man, it was eye-opening just to see how bad the air quality was in an expensive hotel. And Hilton's not cheap. And to see that, I looked at the filter that was in the in-room wall, the wall in the room. I unscrewed it and stuff like that. And it's, caked with dust and stuff like that. So like, okay, great. Even if this was a HEPA MERV 13 filter, it's so clogged with crap that it's practically radioactive itself. So the moral of the story is bring your own sensor package and your own filters if you're going to be in a hotel room, because the air in there is not clean at all. And I was specifically on the lookout for COVID, obviously, But this applies to all airborne pathogens, right? If a hotel's got mold in it, guess what? That air ain't moving anywhere other than when you open and close the door to the hall. So that room could be a real problem for people who are sensitive to certain airborne pathogens.
Yeah, no, that's no surprise. As part of efficiency, right? If you want heating and cooling to work at optimum, you're not going to have outside air in that cycle. You want to keep it going. So yeah, the filters become key. And yeah, I love you with your screwdriver checking out the filter and digging into the guts of it. I'm sure the housekeeping is not swapping that thing out every 8 hours. That's just not at all on the list of things that are getting done. So
definitely not. So yeah, it's be careful when you're traveling. There's a lot of dirty air, and we didn't really think about this as much before the pandemic. But if you go to like New York City, go to like old hotels in New York City or apartment buildings, the big radiators in those buildings, they are designed to run super hot. And I never figured out why until I was reading during the 1918 pandemic. Building codes changed so that those heaters would run, and by design meant you had to have the windows open, right? So it was designed to heat the room with windows open in like January to get the right temperature, because that was their answer during the influenza pandemics to say, let's get fresh air into these places. And we don't design places like that anymore.
Yeah, that is old school. I have to go back to my UMass dorms to remember those days where, the steam heat was just so hot, you have to keep a window open. And it all makes sense now looking back through the lens of history on that. So. All right, I mentioned I'm going to be at Inbound. If you're going to be there, go ahead and hit me up via Twitter, the Marketing Over Coffee newsletter. Anything else coming up for you in the next week?
I've got a webinar with Jay Bear, called the Site Improve webinar. It's going to be in August. I'll have a link to that. And then the Content Marketing World, be driving back out to Cleveland with my fans, my CO2 sensors, to share my content and not my germs there. Marketing Props B2B Forum here in October in Boston. I already talked to Ann Hanley and said, wait till I see all the gear I'm going to bring to a local show. And then HeapCon over in Belgrade in November. So lots of stuff happening for the fall.
Cool. That sounds good. That'll do it for this week. So until next week, enjoy the coffee.
Enjoy the coffee.